Um, Today's meeting is kind of a bringing back together a lot of the advisors and consultants that the township and the board has worked with, both professional staff and the board, in pursuing extending public sewers into some of the older and even oldest neighborhoods of the township. We've done several years of investigations to identify the appropriateness and the necessity. And when we had discovery through the assistance of our consultants with Fleece and Vandenbrink, we were able to leverage financing from the Rural Development Program of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which Paul Bristol today is here to represent. We have been granted eligible for a poverty rate, low-cost loan for our projects, and each day I think the interest rates keep going down, but it is a very exceptional rate of cost of borrowing, and most importantly, we have 40 years to pay it back to the federal government, which would not otherwise be allowed or obtainable if we went to the private bond market for those funds to extend these sewers. We have bid the project. We bid it in 2 construction contracts. We have identified the low bidders at this time, and that material is part of the overall bid project. Matt Johnson can go over the evaluation of the bids, but we are prepared to recommend proceeding with the 2 low bids. However, proceeding would be contingent upon finalizing the loan with USDA and the sale of the bonds. It's important, however, to mention that the contract price did come in over the expected budget, over the engineer's estimate. And so over the next week or so, we will be working with the engineer and the road commission to do what USDA describes as value engineering, to see where we can cut costs to get closer to the amount of funding that USDA has made available to us. If we can't get closer to that, we may have to go back to USDA and seek an additional bond to cover that difference. I think that kind of summarizes everything, Libby, unless you want to add something or any specific questions as to where we are immediately.
I think that's good. I think, do you have any other questions on that, Ken, before we go on to other?
Libby, do we have any idea what the current interest rate is on the market today? And what does the timeline look like for us to, as we start to approach settlement? What's that timeline look like?
I'm gonna turn that over to Paul Bristol, who's with USDA.
Yeah, so this is Paul.
Before we move forward into the presentation by the professional project people, I have one question for Mark, if I might, please, Libby.
Yes.
Thanks. So I think what I heard you say is that the project came in over budget, and so in conjunction with our partners, we're going to go back and see if we can do some budget not amendments, but some budget analysis to see if we can come in within the scope of the financing. Is that correct?
That is, it's value engineering to see where there are potential savings.
So at this point, and I know, so can you give some insight into whether or not you think that that's likely going to be successful?
I'm going to actually defer a lot to our engineer, but I will perhaps leave that to his more focused questions. I would say yes, that we can find some issues there. A lot of the costs, a lot of the area where value engineering would be most fruitful is probably related to the reconstruction of the road. The standards and depth of pavement to be replaced, the width of the pavement. And I say that because Road Commission did ask us to do a lot of additional work upgrading some of the storm sewer systems, all which were of sound need, but I think there might be cost savings if we went back to the Road Commission and said, hey, do we really have to replace this structure? Some of it had to do with professional opinions as to what minimum separation distance is needed between certain types of utilities. The Road Commission asked us to reconstruct some of the utilities which are near to provide greater separation of those utilities. Secondly, and the second reason why I think we can find some value engineering adjustments is that I do believe one of the things we could come back to USDA is to also adjust the scope of the project, or perhaps take pieces out and propose constructing them or moving them into the phase 2 project.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. I'd like to get back to Paul Bristol, if you would.
Sure. I think the question I heard was about the current interest rate. And our current interest rate for this quarter, which this quarter started April 1st, is 1 3/8. So that's 1.375%. So the way our funding works is the loan winds up being the lower of the rate at the time of loan approval versus loan closing. The $8,346,000 loan for phase 1, when it was approved in August of 18, the interest rate at the time of loan approval was 2.375%. If we can get the loan closed this quarter, so that would be during April, May, or June, we can close the loan at 1 3/8%, so we can save a whole percentage point.
Paul, I have a quick question. Can you talk to why did Oshtemo not qualify for grant monies through the USDA, and what that process was, and why are they loans and not grants?
Sure. When a applicant applies, they apply for federal funds. They don't apply for a loan, and you don't apply for a grant. You just apply to the program. So we received the application for $8,346,000, and it was USDA that made the decision to do a loan only project. So it wasn't that the township didn't apply or something got goofed up in the application process. The township correctly applied for $8,346,000 of federal funding from the program. And your question though is, why didn't we get any grant? A lot of it boils down to the fact that we don't have that much grant money for the program. There's a lot of funding available, but the vast majority of our funding is in the form of loan dollars and not grant dollars. Like, for example, in the last couple of years, we've done I got a list of the projects that we've done in my area that have been loan only, and some of them are pretty close to Oshtemo Township. So there's the village of Vicksburg. We approved a loan only for a water project, a sewer project, and a storm sewer. So there's 3 projects in Vicksburg that are loan only. City of Fenville, that's a water project, is a loan only. The village of Baroda, that was a loan only project. Lakewood Wastewater Authority, which is in Lake Odessa, that's a sewer project, and that was loan only. White Cloud Sherman Township Utilities Authority up in Newaygo County, that was a loan only. Quincy, that was a water and a sewer project, and both were loan only. Montague, up in Muskegon County, that was a loan only water project. And also the village of Lake Odessa, that was a loan only water project. And we do have, on our most recent, we got 3 projects that are going to be under construction. Well, 2 of these 3 are under construction right now. We've got Door Township and Layton Township Wastewater Authority. So it's your neighbors not too far north of you on 131. That's a loan only project for sewer improvements at their treatment plant. And I don't know if I mentioned the village of Homer, but the village of Homer is a loan only for a sewer project. And lastly, the village of Ravenna. That's a water project. And on a side note, the Door Layton Wastewater Authority and Homer and the village of Ravenna, all of those projects have come in over budget too when we opened up bids. So all 3 of those projects have subsequent loans for additional funding. So on all 3 of those projects, they all looked at value engineering, which is what you're starting to look at. And we were able to approve the subsequent loans because of higher than anticipated bids. So.
And Paul, my next question is, we got approved or looking to get approved if we're approved in second quarter at that 1.375. That's the poverty rate, correct? That's the
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So 1.375 is the poverty interest rate. We have a 3-tiered interest rate structure. There's either poverty interest rate, which is the lowest. Then there's an intermediate interest rate and a market interest rate. And the intermediate rate right now is the 1 3/8. And the reason why the township qualified for the poverty interest rate is you hit the 2 requirements for it. And those 2 requirements are you have to have a median household income threshold that you meet. It has to be, I'm working from home, I forget the number, but it has to be below, I think, right about $42,000 a year for a median household income of the project service area. So the township met that requirement. Then you also met the requirement for for safety and health. So for public safety and health standards, because of the failing septic systems in the area, we were able to qualify for the project at the poverty interest rate. So not all the projects we fund qualify at the poverty interest rate. So that was very helpful to get the project in at the poverty rate.
And are those numbers based on 2010 census numbers, or was that
Yes.
a different? Okay.
Yeah,
So,
pretty much 2010 census.
So with the census being done this year, potentially that could change next year if we were to do the same kind of process next year.
It'll probably take longer than 1 year to implement it. It takes a while before those numbers roll out and we start using them. So I'm guessing next year we'll probably still use those same numbers, but in 2, maybe 3 years from now, we'll certainly, I would think, by then be using the 2020 census.
Okay.
I've got a few questions if you're done, Grant.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I got them written down here. So this one, I guess, would be for bond counsel. could you maybe explain to the public that's on the meeting here with us why the township has decided to go ahead and issue bonds for this project versus saving cash and paying for it over time?
Looks like Mark Nelson is muted. There you go.
Good evening. Thanks for the question, Zach. Certainly with the, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Certainly with the size project and the need in the township for the project, it's quite a big chunk to save up for. Even if you figured you were putting aside $1 million a year from funds with a project of $8 to $10 million, you're looking at 8 to 10 years to do it. So obviously you have a need now, and you're trying to address that need sooner as opposed to later. I also note that, and Bobby Benzinski of Benzinski and Company, the township's registered municipal advisor, could comment. The common way that municipalities fund infrastructure projects like this are, as your question asks about, pay as you go, which takes a lot of time to do, or you can go out to the conventional market and seek to borrow money from banks and underwriters. But there are some limitations in state law that make that for a project this size, this cost, difficult. One is that if you go out to the conventional market under state law, you're limited to finance to 30 years. But because here with this project, you're going to finance with rural development, the federal government, state law allows you to go out an additional 10 years for 40 years. So that's an advantage. Also, and Bobby can speak more to this if the board's interested, that typically banks and underwriters aren't that interested these days in lending money for 30 years. They want to lend for a much shorter period of time, which means that the cost to your customers is higher because you have to shorten the term for repayment. So those are some factors to consider and that the board is considering.
Thank you. Next question I would have is for municipal finance. And it's a pretty simple one, I guess. It's, in your opinion, are the charges that the township is imposing to pay for this project to the property owners that are going to directly benefit, are they unreasonable? We've got our frontage, per foot frontage fee, or a parcel fee, and our benefit unit fee, as well as the debt service charge that'll be applied to all the sewer bills. Could you elaborate on whether those are unreasonable?
Bobby, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. This is Bobby Benzinski. First of all, you're borrowing debt. You have to repay the debt. The cost of the project is the cost of the project. Your connection fee of $11,500 is not unreasonable. We've seen connection fees all across the state that run anywhere from, $8,000-$9,000 to $20,000. So that's, and it is what it is. As Mark indicated, you would go out to the market today to finance this. You'd be really pushing it to get it out to 25 years, even though state law allows you to borrow at that for up to 30 years. If you borrowed today in the open market at, we'll say, 25 years, you're looking at probably 3 to 3.25%, where you're getting a 40-year loan at 1.375. The advantage to rural development is that you can pay these bonds off at any time with a 30-day notice. If you finance in the open market, you are restricted to not being able to pay your bonds off within the first 10 years because investors want to know that they're going to have their bonds for at least 10 years. That's the market normal today. And again, The rates, you have to pay this debt service, or you have to pay the loan back. And those are the rates. I think these are competitive rates when you look at statewide rates. As I said, they range anywhere from 8,000 or 9,000 to 20,000, just depending on the area and the cost.
Okay, thank you. And just the one little follow-up to that is, based on the connection fees and the debt service charge, is there any way that this is going to create a windfall for the township, where the township would end up profiting in bringing in more money than the cost of the project?
No, what we've done is we've structured the rate structure so that you have approximately enough money every year to pay the debt service off. We never want it real tight, because if the projections don't materialize, if people don't use as much water that we project, you have a coverage factor. The township board, when they have a debt service charge and a monthly service charge, always has the authority to go back and adjust that rate at any time. We always recommend that issuers review their rates on an annual basis as part of their annual budget process. And if rates are getting to be too high, you lower them. If you don't have customers as projected, then you have to raise rates.
Thank you. I've got a couple more questions, so I guess if it's okay, I'll just keep going here. The next question would be for the representative from the city, and I would like you to speak to what the capabilities are of the water reclamation plant and how those are differ from on-site treatment like a septic tank, and whether one is better than the other.
Zach, the city is not here present this evening. They're willing to answer these questions later and get that back to us, but I believe that Lucas might be able to answer some of that from the county health.
That'll work.
Yeah, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I thought I'd let you know too that Vern is on. He was having some internet difficulties, so him and I might jump on and off here. So
we could probably put you both on. Is he able to speak?
I just unmuted him.
Oh, great. Okay, good.
Yeah, Libby, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. So I'm Vern Johnson with Kalamazoo County Environmental Health. I'm the Environmental Health Chief. And so, yeah, that's a good question. For on-site sewage systems, you have a septic tank and then you have an absorption area. And that can be a drain bed, that can be drain trenches, or in cases where lot sizes are very small, we will, on a deviation, put in dry wells. The septic tank and drain trenches and drain bed offer both anaerobic and aerobic treatment of the sewage waste stream. The difference between if you're comparing a municipal system with an on-site sewage treatment system is that the homeowner really becomes the operator. They are the ones that need to operate and pump the system routinely. They need to watch certainly what they're putting down their drains, and that would go for either system. And it's really difficult in this area where we have over 50% of the home reliant on dry wells. The dry wells really offer very little aerobic treatment whatsoever of the sewage waste, and that increases nitrogen to get in our groundwater, that type of thing, where the municipal system, that system and that waste stream is got a 3-stage treatment that they go through. And at the end stage, before they discharge that wastewater, that wastewater is daily checked and after treatment, just to make sure their primary, secondary, tertiary treatments are actually working and removing suspended solids. Their biological oxygen demands are low, and it's removing and having acceptable levels of nitrates that will be discharged in the surface waters.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that did. I think so. Thank you very much. A follow-up to that then is, it it's my understanding, and let me know if this is correct, that the stormwater system and the sewage systems are separated in Kalamazoo, and that they flow into the water reclamation plant in their own pipes. Is that true?
That is correct.
Okay, and so then with that being the case, what's the likelihood that a heavy rain event might result in the discharge of less treated sewage into the river?
From the treatment plant?
Yes.
So certainly, that's all about the capacity of the treatment plant to be able to have the necessary capacity to absorb those extra flows that can come, and certainly has historically. I certainly don't want to speak for the city. I do know that other municipalities have had issues with the stormwater causing to have a release of untreated wastewater. I know that the City of Kalamazoo treatment plant does a very good job with not having those issues routinely.
Thank you. And then the last question I have is probably for the county health department again, is it's our understanding that there are many homes in the project area that we're currently discussing that are on their second and third septic systems. Is that problematic to the county health department, and why?
I'm going to say it's a challenge, and here's the reason why. It's a challenge. We have many homes that are on their second or third system, and the expense and the challenge of removing the original system, taking all of that contaminated soil to a type 2 landfill, there's huge cost with that. And so what we do is we find another area on their property to put a second or third system. The problem lies when you have older lots that are small, or you're in a subdivision that has a high concentration of both septic and wells. So we have to stay away from basement walls, property lines, proper isolation from water wells also. And so when you start putting your first system in, and then you go to your second and then your third, you're really running out of real estate to actually put a system in. And couple that with some of the challenges that we're having with some heavy soils, it's just a matter of the price tag really goes up quite high very quick on these systems. And so what we have to do at times is permit the installation of dry wells. And again, as I spoke, dry wells offer disposal of a waste stream, but it does very little to treat the waste stream. And so we only issue those permits for dry wells as a deviation, as the last resort for that homeowner. Their only choice would be to pump and haul the waste, or to have the dry wells. And so we issue those types of deviations. And quite frankly, in this area, that accounts for 62% of the homes that are reliant on those dry wells.
Thank you very much. I don't have any other questions.
I have a question. I think this is more for Bobby. Some of the comment that we've gotten, I mean, up until now, it's continued to be why sewer, and I like that we continue to go through those questions. But the more recent comment we've gotten is that why sewer right now during this COVID-19 emergency, and is it really a smart idea to move forward during this time period where people feel, I mean, there's a lot of economic hardship that people are going through now and anticipate. So why would this still be a good time to move forward?
Well, Benzinski and Company represents the township as their municipal advisor. This project, we were brought in approximately 4 years ago to start this project. The township applied and was approved for rural development financing. One of the criteria is that construction bids have to be in hand to close the loan. That is a requirement of the letter of conditions set forth by rural development. And we proceeded with the process as required under the letter of conditions. We took the bids. We didn't have a COVID-19 situation to where we have it today. It is the township's decision to proceed with this project or not. It is not one of your municipal advisor. You have construction bids for the project. Will the construction bids remain in place after COVID-19? I don't know that. I can't project that. I don't believe that any professional on this call can. I don't know where interest rates will be, and I don't know if the funding will remain. So it's a decision that has to be made by the township board, not by your professionals.
I suppose, Libby, if I may, it's Mark Middleton. You know, we could ask a question of Paul Bristol and kind of back up too for Bobby is, Paul or Bobby, when's the last time you can remember a poverty interest rate at 3.75%?
Well, I'm probably the oldest on the phone of the professionals. I don't remember that rate. I don't really remember open market rates being at, 2.5% for 20-year financing. It's a very lucrative interest rate. Everybody talks about how the stock market and the municipal bond market and the government market got real sloppy, and there was a very lack of liquidity at the beginning of the shutdown, if you want to call it a shutdown. And when you look at it, interest rates are about 20 basis points or less than 1/4% higher than they were, we'll call it February 14th, just to pick a date. But you could have that market movement in anything. Even if you didn't have that uncertainty, in a 2-month span, you could see the market move that way. And, as everybody said, rates are going to go up at some point. Just when? I mean, we've all been saying that for a lot of years. The Fed is at 0. I hope to God we never go below 0 like other countries have, but, it's a possibility. Paul, I didn't mean to steal any thunder from you, but you feel free to comment.
So, no, I was just taking a look at that. And right now in our portfolio in our Grand Rapids office, between our water program, our sewer program, and community facilities, which is like libraries, fire stations, city halls, those kind of projects, we have 87 borrowers that have 150 loans with us. Of those 150 loans that we have in our Grand Rapids portfolio, there's only one other loan that has an interest rate under 2%. So you would be the second community to join that list if you get the project closed. To answer your question about when was the last time the rate was 1 3/8, since 2003, we've had a rate at 1 3/8 one other time. It was, I forget, I want to say 2016 or 17. But we've had that rate one other time. Most of the times the rates are fluctuate anywhere from about 2 to mid 4% range.
So Dusty, to your question, then obviously, and as Bobby mentioned, I mean, it's ultimately a decision for the township board whether to proceed, but certainly the current financing conditions for rural development are very favorable for the township.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer.
So I have a few quick questions, if you don't mind, Libby. In terms of the value engineering that we're looking at doing, what does that timeline look like? Are we looking at 20 days, 30 days, 2 months to complete that process? And what is, if you had to put a percent on the likelihood of us closing this in this quarter, what would you rate that?
I guess that's for me, unless Matt Johnson wishes to jump in here. I would say it is very doable. Our real target date is the contractors. Their bid prices, I believe, had a 90-day guarantee on it. So we're close to midway through that. So we really anticipate coming to resolution with this issue of value engineering within the next 30 days or less. And as I say, if it's a question of reducing the project scope, that might be relatively easily done. The value engineering with respect to working with Road Commission could indeed take longer. Matt, do you have anything you'd like to add? I see Matt
Yes.
Johnson with Fleece and Vandenbrink is available.
This is Matt Johnson with Fleece and Vandenbrink. As Bobby mentioned, we'd started working on this project 4 years ago, and we had the application and the estimate completed in around 2017. So 2017, just to give an example, asphalt prices in the Kalamazoo County area were $55 a ton. Because of the low interest rates, the city of Kalamazoo, the city of Portage, and other outlying townships have heavily started investing in infrastructure projects. So we created a situation where there's not enough contractors or people available to do the amount of work. So prices in this area have skyrocketed. So what we're seeing in asphalt prices currently is right around $72 to $75 a ton, which was quite a percent increase from where it was $55 a ton 4 years ago. And it's the same thing with everything. Material prices are going up. Labor costs are going up. We tried to predict where we were, and we were just short of the mark, so to speak. So currently, the total project cost for phase 1, contracts A and B, sit at about $9.4 million. The bond amount through the USDA is capped at $8.346 million. So that's an overrun amount of about $1.095 million. So roughly that's right around 11%. So if that number is less than 20%, the application to get those bonds, which are called Series B, and Paul can speak more to those, is a little bit more simple than if it was over 20%. But if that number is over 10%, like it is at 11.6, then it's got to go to the national office for approval. And Paul can discuss more on that. So approximately what we're looking at is value engineering, seeing if we can get that number down to right around 10%, or do some sort of value engineering as required by USDA. So currently, if we can cut an amount of $260,000 from the project through value engineering, we can speed the process up, so to speak, and we don't have to send it to the national office for approval. Now, value engineering can consist of many things. We can work with the Road Commission to reduce the amount of asphalt or the amount of materials that we're putting in, or we can elect to cut subdivisions from the project as well. But that's a kind of a township direction as to where they want to go and what they want to do for the value engineering. So to make a long story short, value engineering is possible and very probable. It's a relatively low percentage of the project, about 1.6. It's just a directions from the township as to what do we want to remove or value engineer with the project. So working with the Road Commission could take additional time as well. And then to reiterate Mark's point is the contractors will hold their price for 90 days. So on the 91st day, the contractors have the option to say, I'm going to withdraw my bid with no penalty, which means we would have to either rebid the project or get them to extend their bid prices. But the key is we want that project to close in the second quarter to take advantage of the 1.375% interest rate. That would be in the best interest of the township, in my opinion.
Another point to that question, Ken, is that the earliest it would be back for board decision on after the value engineering, it would be May 12th.
Okay, and that puts us within the timeline of closing in second quarter.
Yes, that's the earliest. Yep.
So once the board approves, if the board approves of it, what is the timeline to get it closed from that point? Is there any estimate?
Paul,
Mark,
Mark?
Yeah. So it's going to be a combination of both myself and Paul. But essentially what will happen for the township board's decision-making purposes is we'll have to adopt a bond authorizing resolution to authorize the issuance of the bonds. And then I prepare the closing documents and we set up a date and time for those documents to be executed and the bonds to be delivered to rural development to set up the closing. So, but there are some things on Paul Bristol's end with rural development that we'll have to go through and make sure that we're in a position to be able to close within that time frame.
Yeah, so from the time we award or if the township awards a construction contract in May, we'll be hustling it to get it closed by June, but that's the goal. I think it's a reasonable goal, but from early May to the end of June, that time can really get away from you if you're not aggressively working towards getting the project closed. I think a lot of, like Mark Nettleton said, a lot of what has to happen usually between contract award and loan closing is getting the bond ordinance approved by the township. And we also want to get the construction contract finalized and all drawn up. So the construction contract can get awarded, but then it takes a little bit of time for the contractor to turn in their payment performance bonds. We want to make sure we have those and they're good and solid. And before we close on the financing. A lot of what this kind of boils down to here too is we're on this value engineering. I think once we get the value engineering in place, we'll be able to figure out what the project cost is going to be with the cost overrun, and then we're in a position to know how much extra funds we need to come up with. So.
All right, and then say we do get this closed in Q2, what does it look like as far as start time to begin construction? I know that's completely up to once it's awarded in the developer, but is there any estimation? Are we talking in the summertime, or we waiting till fall to get started, or is it the next day it starts?
Once the contract is awarded, we would hold a pre-construction meeting and get a schedule. And we still have to get through submittals. But I do know that the contractors are looking to start as soon as they can. So the big thing is going to be also the COVID-19 and the governor's executive order contains a provision where construction can proceed assuming it's deemed essential, and that's a township decision to determine if it's essential. So
Matt, this is Bobby. Can any of the contractors pull their bids due to COVID-19?
That is a good question.
I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
There's no.
I didn't mean to do that. I'm serious. I did
There's
not.
no provision in the contract that allows them to pull their bid for COVID-19.
Okay, that's fair enough.
There is provisions in the construction contract that allow them to change or modify their schedule for construction based on COVID-19.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for County Health. If I missed it, forgive me, but I'm wondering what you're typically seeing in terms of how long septic systems last, because some of the people that are opposed do have systems that are 25 or 30 years old and they think they're working, just fine. I don't know what you're seeing. And then I'm aware of another home that was built in '06 that has a failed system in our township that you're working with the owner, not in the sewer district, but a different area to get a replacement septic system. So are there any rules of thumb, or does it depend on soils, or what does that look like from County Health? Because you are on you deal with that much more closely than we do at the township.
Yeah, Libby, that's a good question. There's a lot of variables, certainly, in how long an on-site sewage treatment system is going to last. Size of the home, the use of how much water and wastewater is generated. Soils certainly play into that as well, as far as the soil profile goes, and then how it's maintained, or if it's not maintained. So we're seeing need for replacement in this area between that 10 and 17 years. It used to be around 7 years, and then when we put the replacement systems in, a simple device of an alternator valve that would allow the old system to rust and the new system being used, and having the homeowner go back and forth after a number of years of the failed system that had that chance to rust. So we're seeing, that on a replacement system that could go upwards of 17 years and then need to be replaced again. And then, quite honestly, that's where the challenge begins, because on the smaller lots, that's usually when you start running out of room, and the old system would have to be tore out, hauled out, and that's a lot of cost. But it's around that 10 to 17 years.
Okay, and then with the recent extremely high water table, in Texas Township and then Oshtemo South A Street, are you seeing or forecasting impacts to septic systems? That's a concern I have.
Yeah, so, fortunately, one of the things that we do when we design an on-site treatment system is we do soil analysis. And my staff will go out there and we take a hand auger, and we're checking the soil profile at the 4 and 6 inches all the way down to 12 feet. We size the system and we locate the system where it's 5 feet above, or 4 feet rather, above seasonal high water marks that we can see in the soil. And we can track that. If it's a 100-year floodplain, we can go ahead and track that. So I'm not forecasting necessarily that this high water is going to fail a number of systems, but for the systems, quite frankly, that we don't have on record and may have been put in without a permit, which, back in the 50s and 60s, that's entirely possible. That may be a factor.
So the dry wells go deeper than the fields, the drainage fields, correct?
They do indeed. Yeah, they're either going to be down around the bottom of the dry well, could be down upwards of 5 feet under the ground to upwards of 8 feet down. But we still will size that system and locate that system where it's at least 4 feet above that seasonal high water mark that we're seeing in the soil.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess I'm wondering, we've heard a variety of questions have been very helpful, but I'm wondering if, Libby, we could move through the professionals that are with us today and ask if they have anything to add that they think might be of use that they've not had the opportunity to say at this time.
That's a good point, and I can do that. I'll start with Bobby.
I have nothing else to add at this point.
Okay. Stephen, I don't know.
I don't have anything to add either. I think Bobby covered everything.
Okay, thank you. Matt Johnson.
This is Matt Johnson. One of the things I would recommend is the board at least discuss or provide direction to staff as to where they're thinking and where they want to go with the project. Whether that's cut out some subdivisions or work with value engineering with the road commission. That would be my only recommendation to add.
Okay. I made a note to discuss that when we get to the update on the phase one. Matt, thank you. Mark Nettleton.
Libby, I guess two things. One is, obviously we've talked about the low interest rate that rural development is able to offer for this project. As Paul's indicated, the interest rates do change on a quarterly basis. And so, and I think Paul would answer it this way to say, we don't know what the interest rates for the next quarter will be. It's very well possible that they could stay the same. They could go up. But obviously, we're looking to try to close within this second quarter. I think the issue for the township, and it's something that Matt Johnson has to take a look at, is when does the contractor bid hold period expire? So we've got to, factor in those two considerations. Potential change in the interest rate if we go beyond second quarter and close in third quarter, and is that even feasible given the bid hold period on the contracts?
Okay. Thank you. Vern or Lucas?
Yeah, just real quick. First of all, I appreciate you having and inviting us to your meeting. Just a couple thoughts is that our agency always will support local municipalities extending municipal sewer, and especially in Kalamazoo County, where whether you're on city water or you have your own private water well, we're reliant in Kalamazoo County for getting our drinking water from groundwater. And anything that we can do to fully treat waste streams to protect our aquifer that we're so reliant on, we definitely support, and we support this endeavor fully.
Thank you.
Libby, if I can piggyback off that too, I think it's important for the board to know, and members of the public too, that state law, the public health code, expresses a preference for a connection to public sanitary sewers as opposed to septic.
Thank you. And then Paul Bristol.
Yeah, just a quick comment. The goal of the program is to get the facility or the system built and in operation and serving people. It's not for us to have a loan with the township for 40 years. So like Bobby mentioned, if you or some point it came up, but if you have the ability to make extra payments along the way, you're welcome to. There's no penalty for doing that. We'll apply any extra payments towards principal so that'll reduce your interest accrual. But like I said, the goal of the program is to get the facility built and serving people, not to have a loan with you for next 40 years. That's it.
Thank you. I think I got everyone.
Libby, I had one more question, if I may.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, maybe it was covered earlier and I didn't quite catch it, but I know we talked about doing the value engineering because we have a little bit of an overage in the bids quotes for, in the bids for phase one. But there was also a conversation in the capital improvements committee regarding a Series B bond. And I just want to understand at what point would that be something that we would pursue? And if we do pursue that, would we have to issue a second public notice of the intent to take on the debt?
Libby, I'll answer that. Zach, you take the second question first. No, you would not have to do a second or subsequent public notice. It's already covered in the original notice. It was covered within the original scope. And we discussed a little bit earlier on that after the value engineering process, as Matt Johnson noted, if we're under a certain threshold, then rural development has an easier time approving a second series, and we would essentially have the township board in the bond authorizing resolution that I mentioned a couple minutes ago authorize both series of bonds. So I think once the determination is made in terms of value engineering and we find out the scope of any additional funding that would be required from rural development, that then we could bring it as one package to the township board for determination for both series.
Okay, thank you very much.
Libby, this is Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
To clarify that rural development has a restriction that they cannot give one loan in excess of $9,999,000 to any municipality. So you would have to do what they call two series of bonds or two loans. They call them loans, we call them bonds. They're the same. So if we go over the $9,999,000, we will have to do a second series, but it will not do any. It will not be any different. It'll just be two series. It'll be the same as the first series. It'll be paid from the same revenue stream.
Thank you,
Paul
Bobby.
or
I
Mark?
don't think we're looking at that for this.
Okay.
Even where the estimates, the bids
Okay.
came
Well,
in.
I'm just saying when we
No.
talk about two series.
I think the two series, this is Stephen, by the way. I thought the two series came into play because the original application amount was the $8,346,000, and based on conversations with Paul, unless I'm misspeaking here, I think the Series B is to cover any amounts over the $8,346,000 in the original application.
Yeah, I think we'll probably wind up with two series, and if the A will be the $8,346,000, and if there is a subsequent loan needed, that'll be the B.
Okay.
I think because we got two loans, the $8,346,000 was obligated in the previous fiscal year, so it's kind of hard to lump the two together into one and have one loan
Between two different,
yeah,
between two different years. Okay.
yeah. So, but Bobby was also right about the $9,999,000. Yeah. So.
Okay.
So this is Matt Johnson. I'll just chime in as well. So in order to not issue the Series B bond, the township would need to value engineer an amount equal to about $1.09 million, which would be a pretty substantial cut in the project. If it were to issue a Series B bond rather quickly to meet second quarter, it would need to value engineer about $260,000 from the project. And just one more thing too, the original bond schedule had an estimate of 3%. So at 1.375% interest, it's an approximate savings of $3.6 million. So that's really kind of the benefit of getting the poverty rate and the 1 3/8 or 1.375% interest rate.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yep. I think we're ready to move on to the second item under sanitary sewer, which is the public comment, and then board discussion on the comment this evening, and then also public comment that we've received over the last several months. So, so this is a time when we ask the public to raise your hand if you would like to speak. We will now take public comment by computer and by phone. We'll pause to see if anyone virtually raises their hand, indicating they wish to speak. I'm going to repeat, to raise your hand using the computer, open the participant tab that you find at the bottom of your computer screen. The participant list will show in a column on the right side of your screen. Look for your name and then select raise hand next to your name. Sometimes the raise hand is at the bottom of the screen of that column. If you're calling into the meeting by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. We will start at the top of the participant list and call on participants in descending order. And the usual policies for public comment pertain to this meeting as well. Those are found on the second page of the agenda. And I think I'm not going to walk through them, but comment is limited to 4 minutes in duration unless special permission has been granted in advance, and no one has approached me, so we are looking at a 4-minute public comment period.
Okay, Libby, it looks like we have 5 people raising their hands for public comment, and we'll start with Beth.
Okay.
Go ahead, Beth, whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you. I'm going to start my phone here so I don't go over the 4 minutes. I very much appreciate the people who have spoken this evening. I listened very carefully and I have 2 pages of notes. I guess one thing that I'd like to say to all of you, to all of the professionals, I wish I could sit down with all of you and ask my questions individually. That's not possible. So I hope that the board and all of the professionals can bear with those of us who have a lot of questions. Since I have to narrow down my comments and questions to maybe 1, I'd like to return to what Dusty said about the virus and about going forward with this project and whether or not we should. And I have to say that in my careful listening, I heard only facts and figures. I heard timelines, interest rates, poverty rate, how long of a time would have to occur before the project could begin if the bond is accepted, et cetera, et cetera. And I have to say, none of us knows any of that information right now. Not one of you can predict what's going to happen because of the virus. I'm sitting here at a long day, at the end of a long day, and thinking, okay, I'm going to sit here for an hour and a half, and it's already been an hour and 35 minutes, and I realize it has the potential to go on. But I want to make very clear that we're talking business here, and timelines, and financial rates, and construction rules, and none of us has a clue about what is actually going to happen to any one of us in the next few months. So the question that Dusty raised was not in any way answered by any of the professionals who spoke, because they didn't answer the part about the fear of going on. They answered the questions that a financial advisor would be asking. Of course, it's prudent for us to go ahead. Of course, it's prudent to take advantage of all the enormous amount of work that's been done. But the reality is, you may not be here tomorrow or next month. I want to take this to a personal level. I'm considering all I'm trying to absorb and learn each day about when the possible end of this might occur. And I haven't seen one person, one doctor, give me anything definitive about when I might return to my normal life. And one of the scary questions that popped up in my mind was, what if you're all digging up the road to do the sewer and someone in my family has to go to the hospital? How will I get there? How will someone get to me? I have really only one request of the board at this point, and that is to simply delay these decisions. Every single United States government official is going to be wanting for the economy to move forward and for everything to get back to work and back on our feet. So I can only imagine that all of these agencies that we work with and these bids and these loans and all these things will be in our favor when it's time to get back to work, but none of us knows when that is going to be. So I would respectfully ask that the board strongly consider simply delaying, because we are in the only beginning stages of a global pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next person we have is Richard.
Yes.
Richard, go ahead.
I'm here. Yeah, I have more of a question than a comment. It's pretty simple. Just curious, you talked a lot about value engineering. You know, just curious why the project wasn't value engineered from the start. Why did we have to wait for a cost overrun of about 11% before we start value engineering? That's my question.
Thank you. This is a public comment period. It's not a question and answer period. You're welcome to call the township, and I'm happy to speak with you, or one of our public works.
Okay, I'll do that.
You know, I mean, there has been cost considerations throughout. It's not unusual for a contract to come in over bid and then people revisit. So that's a short, very brief. Mm-hmm.
Okay, our next person is Anna. Anna, go ahead and speak whenever you're ready.
Okay, this is Paula, because Anna and I are listening on her phone. So I have a couple questions for you, statements more or less. With all the sewer, one of the things that we were promised was a pre-construction. And due to the COVID-19, it's going to be impossible to hold in the time frame that's needed in order to move forward. Because I'm sorry, there's no switch to turn this COVID-19 issue off and allow us to have a large gathering in 30 days or less. So that's something that I want to know how the board is going to handle, or at least consider handling, because that's something we were promised. It's something we need to know. We also have the issue of contractors being able to come to our houses and come into our houses and be in our yards and be breaking the governor's rules at this point. If we can even find contractors who will do that. We have several people who are now required to work from home. Again, governor orders, and even as the state starts opening up, that home work is going to continue for a long length of time. So it's critical that there is no disruption of services from our homes, because that is also affecting the economy. Does the board consider the sewer essential? Because non-essential work could stay shut down for a long length of time. Any new construction, the housing outlook right now is very dismal. So how is the board going to classify the sewer system as essential versus non-essential, a wish list versus a crisis for help. So I'd like the board to really give that some strong consideration, because that's going to determine an awful lot of things. And also, you've talked before about giving loans and allowing people to borrow against their properties, et cetera, and that you will finance them. Well, if they don't have jobs and they don't have money coming in right now, I don't think anyone's interested in taking on another huge debt load at the current time until something is a little bit more solid of what's going on with our lives due to the COVID-19. And the disruption of the roads for emergency services, for food deliveries, I think that's very critical, because we have a lot of people who, in our area, our census showed it, our census will show it again. We have a lot of people who are in the target age group of what this disease is decimating, and they are relying upon their home deliveries. They're relying upon at least the simple peace of mind that emergency services can get to them due to this terrible crisis that the global world is experiencing. So these are items and points that I would like to work with strong consideration to. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next person is Z.
Hello.
Z, go ahead.
Hello, is my mic on?
Yes.
Okay. I just was looking at your map here, and I guess my concern is that some properties, I live in the Skyridge neighborhood, are not highlighted in pink as to they're going to be part of this project. And I was just, I know
I'm having a hard time hearing you. Is there a way to speak more directly into the microphone or something?
I'm right up to my mouth when I use it before. Let me see if I can turn it up.
Somehow he got muted.
Well, I was trying to turn it up, trying to find where to turn it up. I had it open before.
If you're holding it closer, I can hear you then. We can hear you then.
All right. I'm just looking at the Skyridge map here and wondering why some properties are not highlighted in pink. I don't know if they're in the past as rights of access to future roads and so on. Who's paying for those? And I know I'm going to go against some people who are on this meeting right now. The cost will not go down. Ambulances will be able to get in because they're only going to be doing a small section of road and tearing it up at a time to do construction work. And my opinion, it's not going to get cheaper. It's not going to get easier. The future is unpredictable no matter what we do. Thank you for all your hard work, and please continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next person is Chris. Chris, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to know if the construction bids have any written provisions for payments on the bids when construction might be stopped for unforeseeable circumstances. So if we sign these bids in Q2, they're not allowed to start construction into Q2 of next year. Are we paying their salary for that year while they're shut down? Is there any provisions in these $8.3 million bids that we're going to be out money if they can't start because of delays or whatever? And then secondly, the life of the system. The expert had said in Kalamazoo, systems last on average 17 years with a switch valve, which is essentially dual systems. And then he seconded that back saying that systems built in the 50s might experience problems because of high tables of water. Well, if it was built in the 50s, it's already a 70-year-old system, but it allegedly failed in 17 years. So how does it even exist? Secondly, to that point, the average life of a septic system, according to every Google search I've ever done with every association related to it, says the average in the U.S. is 25 to 30 years with a single system and possibly doubled by a switch valve.